Hello Tim and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra nuggets and tidbits to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. Just come in from the outside, so my glasses have reacted to the light. They will calm down. It's not that I'm wearing shades in an attempt to look vaguely cool or something. That will never happen. Me looking cool, that is. Anyway. Let's get started with a talk about neutrality, and I will try my hardest not to get too philosophical here, but I will give you a bit of an analogy. I'm going to go first to Ukraine the Latest, a podcast from the Daily Telegraph. Make sure I've got it set on the correct speed. Yeah. So here we have Dom Nichols talking about the decision of the Swiss government not to allow Ruag, the company that wanted to take 96 Leopard 1s and do them up and through Germany, I think, get them to Ukraine. And they are citing their neutrality as the reason that, that wasn't going to be allowed to happen.
Now, finally, Switzerland has blocked the gifting of 96 non-operational Leopard 1 tanks that are currently stored in Italy. They are the property of the Swiss arms manufacturer Raug. The proposal was that these vehicles are going to be refurbished in Germany and then sent to Ukraine. The Swiss government said the request is, quote, inconsistent with applicable law. And that's because Switzerland is a neutral country which can't approve arms sales bound for an active conflict zone, which does kind of beg the question, why make the weapons in the first place? Maybe
I have talked about this a lot previously. For those of you who are new to my channel, you might not have heard me talk about this, but the point is this. If you are going to have an active and successful defense manufacturing export industry, right? So the assumption would be if you're going to have one at all, of course, you want it to be successful, to generate tax revenue, to generate jobs, so on and so forth, wealth for your country, etc. Then it needs to be able to compete in the world market. And if you're saying, yeah, you can make this stuff, but you can't sell it. You can't sell these weapons of war to countries involved in war. You're like, first of all, yeah, it's just odd. And second of all, you will not be able to compete. So if you with other manufacturers. So if you are going to have, this tank, right, and you've made this tank, and you're selling it for comparable, it has comparable characteristics as a tank from, I don't know, Germany, right? I'm making this stuff. It doesn't matter whether they actually make this stuff, but you have a tank that's comparable to this German tank, and it costs the same amount of money as this German tank, and you're selling it to third parties, and the third party comes along and says, right, I'm either going to buy your tank or the German tank. You say, yep, brilliant. If you buy our tank, by the way, you can never sell it on to any country that's involved in war, etc., etc., etc. And then so the third party goes, well, I can buy the tank off you or a tank off Germany, but I don't have those constrictions with buying it from Germany, and I'll be able to sell it on to whoever I like and be able to, generate income from that, or offset the cost of new tanks, or help a country that desperately needs it, like Ukraine. Okay, but if everything else remains equal, then I'm going to buy that off Germany, because buying it off you makes it really complicated if I want to eventually offload these. So you're just not going to generate a competitive advantage, which means you'll sell fewer of these things, which means your unit costs will go up, which means fewer people will end up buying it because your unit costs are higher, and it's this vicious cycle. So it's just not in the best interest. If you're going to have a defense industry that exports, I don't think that is consistent with being neutral. You can't have those two things. Be neutral, by all accounts, be neutral, but I'm going to complain about that in a minute. Be neutral, but don't have a defense industry, or have a defense industry and don't be neutral. Just, yeah, that's my tuppence.
It's just because it brings in a ton of cash while others defend the system's values and the international order you're happy to take profit from. But, who knows? But to show how ridiculous this stance is, I would just ask you to hold in your mind the decision some time ago, unconnected from today, but a separate decision some weeks ago that did get the full backing of the Swiss government, the decision to send 25 Leopard 2 tanks that are currently in service in the Swiss army. They're going to go to Germany next year. Now, Germany has promised not to send those tanks to Ukraine, but they will fill gaps in the German military, because Germany is sending a load of other Leopard 2s to Ukraine. I mean, it is, we are properly dancing on a head of a pin here. I would invite you to have a look at Stanley Pignall, who writes for The Economist. He's tweeted today reminding us of an article he wrote in January. I've retweeted it, so if you're not following Stanley or The Economist, have a look at my feed and you'll see the link there. He wrote an article in January which says Switzerland's policy of neutrality in the face of such disregard by Russia for human life and the acceptable conduct in the modern world is looking naive or worse. So Switzerland recently reviewed its neutrality doctrine and decided to stick with it, and says it will only supply hardware to Ukraine if the UN Security Council condemn Russia, which, that's not going to happen for as long as Russia is there and has veto power. We can talk about whether they should still be, but that is a longer conversation. They're not going to veto that at the moment. So all Switzerland has really done so far is to mirror the sanctions that have been imposed by the EU, and even that step has been criticised by some in the Swiss sort of government. So Stanley Pignall says, neutrality looks increasingly like a simplistic answer to complex geopolitical questions. The security of Europe is being fought over in Ukrainian trenches. Any country on the continent declaring itself neutral about the outcome is announcing that its own safety is of scant concern. Non-neutrals resent this. Their guns are implicitly defending neutrals, which get to splurge on more butter and boast of their virtue to boot. Now, in a related issue, today, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer has said neutral EU countries object to giving Ukraine outright security assurances. Mr. Nehammer is in Brussels at a meeting of other EU government leaders. Speaking before that meeting, he said, "For us as neutral states, it is clear we can't give security guarantees. Austria, Ireland, Malta and Cyprus have made it clear they have objections. The role of the neutral status needs to be explicitly taken into account. We will certainly discuss this and we will find formulations that will be acceptable for us as well." It just throws the whole issue of neutrality into sharp focus. And it's one thing to be neutral, I think, when there's not a war in Europe and the egregious abuse of international norms that we're seeing. I think we're in a different place now. This conversation seems to be gathering pace there. Francis, I know you'll have some views on this. What do you say on that? And what else is crossing your desk today?
I have a few things to say about neutrality. Before I really thought about this, maybe years ago, I probably would have been in defense of such a position. But actually, the more I think about it, the more incoherent neutrality is to me. And it's very selfish. It's just really self-serving. And the best way I can kind of express that is in terms of, yet again, an analogy of someone getting beaten up on the road, which is imagine an old granny's getting beaten up on the road by some thug, and you have the ability to help that granny survive. Maybe you and some other people could go along and help stop the thug, restrain him, and allows the granny to survive, to live another day until the police get there or whatever. But you say, no, I'm neutral. I know that's wrong. I'm looking over there and that is wrong. So what this person is doing to the granny is absolutely morally repugnant, but I'm not going to do anything to stop it. Now, if you're not going to do anything, so another analogy would be if you walk past a pond and see someone drowning in the pond, and you have the ability to step in and help them out of the pond, right? Then that's morally what you should do. Given a kind of ordinary understanding of morality. And if you don't do that, if you decide not to do that, then you are morally culpable in the drowning of that person. And actually, I think this is pretty much written into law. So if you're easily able to stop someone from harm, but choose not to stop them, and if you wasn't putting yourself at any risk, blah 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 blah, then, and I guess in war neutrality terms is about putting yourself at risk, I guess, but this is a self-serving nature of it. So if you don't help that person out of the pond and just walk on by and say, I don't help people, like, sorry about that, then that's a problem. So if you're looking on and someone's getting beaten up and you don't help them either together or either on your own or together with other people, then that's a real issue. But then, as Dom Nichols says here, if that old granny or whatever person it is was actually doing something to help you, like, in fending off this thug is actually helping to secure something for you by looking on and not helping them. There is a just rank hypocrisy there. There's like, oh, thanks for helping me out by beating off that thug, but I'm not going to help you because I'm neutral. Meanwhile, all these other people are going and helping that person, and you are getting the benefit of that person beating off the thug with the help of all these others. So that all these other people who are not neutral are going and helping you get the benefit of Russia not having. So all these other nations helping Ukraine are allowing Switzerland to get the benefit of European security, right? But Switzerland are not doing anything to help that. So there are so many levels in which neutrality doesn't make moral sense. It is basically selfish, and I cannot understand. I don't get it. Maybe you can help me out, but I think that actually neutrality is morally repugnant. Like neutrality in the Second World War, especially when Switzerland was harboring the Nazi gold and all that as well. But since neutrality in the Second World War is still sitting by and letting a bully, it is just self-serving. It's like, I'm all right, Jack. What you're doing is horrible. I ain't getting involved. Morally, that is complicity in those activities, in my opinion. I'm gonna stand by and watch it. But then, you can make these arguments that actually Switzerland, benefited from that. But that's the self-serving nature of that neutrality. It's like, yeah, you didn't have mass death of your people, and economically you were kind of sorted and whatnot, and you maybe even benefited off the moral repugnance of the Nazi regime, right? But from a moral point of view, that's really controversial. It's much more difficult to argue that that was a good position to take morally. It's a self-serving position. Like, if your morality is only about you as an individual, you as a nation, profiting, then yeah, that neutrality was morally good. Scare quotes good. But if your morality is a more universal understanding of morality, where you've got a social contract maybe with others around you, in that personal example of a granny getting beaten up or whatever, but in a global sense, that if you have a universal morality, then I think neutrality is morally thoroughly problematic. Like, if you see morally terrible things happening, and you have the ability to help that stop happening, then you are morally obliged, you're obligated to stop that from happening if you want to be a decent moral agent. So therefore, I think neutrality from Austria, from Switzerland here, shows is not strong moral fiber. Like, because you might think neutrality is a really strong moral position to take. Actually, I think it's a morally weak position to take, and it shows moral weakness, and it's self-serving. And in fact, I think they look worse for being neutral, and at the same time are reaping some of the benefits of other people not being neutral and helping Ukraine. And I'm beginning to feel stronger and stronger about that. I'll be interested to see what you think and where you think I'm wrong. I haven't looked into the philosophy of neutrality before in any depth. I've not even looked at this. Is all just like what I'm thinking off the top of my head. So there may be many more nuanced angles to look at this from, and I do get that. But I think just in general, just the principle of standing back whilst terrible things happen and saying, I can't help because I'm neutral, is itself moral complicity in those terrible things happening, and therefore is morally irresponsible. Just yeah, just that's what I feel, and I feel really strongly about that at the moment. But I could change. Uh, right, we're going to move on to talk about the economic woes of Russia. This is super important, and this might define how long Russia can keep going with their invasion. Russia's deepening economic problems, says Chris Owicki, have resulted in a collapse in commodities earnings, drastic cuts in federal government spending, and rail freight yards being clogged with thousands of Chinese shipping containers that are sitting empty for want of goods to export. The Moscow Times reports that Russian government statistics are showing a dire economic situation. And remember, Russian government statistics will be painting everything as well as they possibly can. So whatever they claim, the situation will be worse. As of 27th of May, the Ministry of Finance has spent 48% of the allocated budget, but had only collected 40% of forecast revenues. The deficit stands at 134% of the planned amount. The government has cut its spending for June by 44 billion rubles per day, $498 million, half the average of the previous 5 months. Federal tax collections have fallen by 19% compared to the same period in 2022. So when the government is spending less, the question is what they're spending less on, because they're spending more on the military, on the war, which means they're spending even less on hospitals, schools, welfare, yada yada yada. Everything that you need to have a successful, thriving country full of people realizing their potential and having a high quality and standard of life. That ain't going to be happening because they're screwed financially. Oil and gas revenues have halved from 5,658 to 2,853 trillion rubles. That's $64 billion to $32.3 billion. Exports to Europe have collapsed, and oil companies are having to give double-digit discounts to Indian and Chinese buyers. The government's expenses, this is partly because they need to keep pumping and the gas needs to keep flowing. It's not very easy to stop that from happening, and so therefore you need to sell that. And if your buyers are in a power position, then they can demand discounts that you are not in a position to say no to. I mean, there's a point last year where Russia was literally burning the gas off as it was kind of pumping out. They're having to burn it off because they couldn't store it, because they couldn't sell it. The government's expenses have increased by 26% to 13.23 trillion rubles, of which almost a third, 3.9 trillion rubles, is being spent on secret items of expenditure. War. Secret military spending is likely to amount for as much as 3.1 trillion rubles of this. This represents an increase of 3.5 trillion rubles since last year in the secret category. Taking into account 884 billion rubles of open military spending, the total military expenditure could amount to 4 trillion or $45.3 billion. Russia's economic difficulties are particularly symbolized by the mountains of empty Chinese shipping containers piling up at railway stations across the country. This has become Russia's imports far more. This is because Russia imports far more from China than it exports. An additional problem is that the type of exports between the two countries differ. So what happens with containers, as far as I understand it, and I'm no expert, this is just what I remember from years back, is that you organize stuff such that containers are not empty and in transport. There's no point transporting empty containers. That's really expensive. So when a cargo ship comes in loaded with stuff, ideally it then picks up a load of stuff and leaves with that, or it drops off some stuff there, but picks up some, and it goes to there, drops off some more, picks up. So you have to organize those cargo shipments so that you are always kind of loaded. You don't have an empty ship particularly, or you're not taking empty containers around. It's just a waste. So these empty containers signify that there is stuff coming in. This is just inefficient transport. So there's stuff coming in, but actually there's nothing to go out. Russia is not exporting anything, and that just signifies that kind of asymmetry there. That itself signifies that they are spending and not receiving money. So an additional problem is that the type of exports between the two countries differ. China mostly exports manufactured goods in containers, while Russia mostly exports raw materials in open wagons, gondola cars, or tanks. So yeah, exactly. According to the Moscow Times, the situation is almost critical, and logistics operators have already begun to offer big discounts for the export of containers in the direction of China, so delivery in that direction is much cheaper. This enables freight companies to at least ship something and not just send back empty containers at a bigger loss. I hadn't read this thread, so it's interesting that what I was saying about containers was reflected in what he said there. So glad sometimes I know what I'm talking about. just sometimes. And interesting today, more bad news for Putin, underlining the point I made about Russia's budget figures earlier, says Tim White. The ruble sunk to its lowest rate since the first weeks of the war against the main currencies, even the maligned pound sterling. Russia's currency is down 68 to 75% in a year. Someone else saying actually the ruble tumbles past 89 against the US dollar for the first time in more than 15 months. So the ruble is tanking. Things are looking bad for the Russian economy, and that builds on what I said the other day concerning the Russian economy. Now, I'm going to talk about something that is connected to economic things, and this is Elon Musk. And I know some of you love Elon Musk, and you'll get, "Oh, I'm never listening to you again," or "I turned off the video when you mentioned Elon Musk." But this is quite important, and it does pertain to Russia. And even if you really love Elon Musk, it's worth thinking about why. It's always worth trying to understand why someone does things, right? So why has Elon Musk sided more and more with Russian Kremlin propaganda and talking points? And so if you survey what Elon Musk has said over the course of the war, he started off quite vocally in support of Ukraine, and then that went south, probably as sanctions bit more and more. Now, what Pekka Kalyoniemi says here, he goes through a whole host of evidence to show that Elon Musk has been growing in support of Russian disinformation and what his activities on Twitter have been. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail. It's all here for you. Go and check out this thread, and I'm going to join it later on at about number 19. But you can talk about we can talk a lot if you want about the Russian disinformation that Elon Musk has been parroting. And the question is, why is he parroting that? And this goes down. It's not only talking about the dodgy polling data from before the annexation from 2012 to support his position, as if I've talked about that previously, praising Mearsheimer, who's a bit of an appeaser, sometimes called a realist, and all this kind of stuff. Musk is parroting all this claptrap. Anyway, we're going to join it later here. We're going to just skip through. God, I want to talk about all of this. Tucker Carlson, Musk, Twitter. Anyway, so free speech, so on and so forth. So Musk, we're going to join it just here. Musk has removed plenty of barriers to slow down the spread of disinformation. So he's removed barriers which allows disinformation to spread more easily, and that includes the EU's voluntary code of practice against disinformation. So he's just got rid of a voluntary code of practice as if like, I don't care about disinformation, and he then parrots that himself. At the same time, he's complied to censorship requests from Indian and Turkish ruling parties by removing and restricting content. So he says he's a free speech advocate, reduces barriers for disinformation. So it's like, hey, free speech is really important. But as soon as someone says, you need to censor that, or we're going to shut down Twitter in our country, or harm you, then he kowtows to that straight away. So that's problematic. But then the important stuff is here. So the question is, why is he parroting the Russian disinformation? To conclude, why is Musk pushing, among other things, a peace plan where Ukraine would lose a lot? My theory is that the war is bad for business. His businesses require a lot of raw materials, and both Russia and China are in the top 3 of the biggest raw material producers. And there's a graph to show you raw material producers. Tesla Inc.'s conflicts mineral report from 2022, so Tesla's own paperwork, reveals that Russia, as well as China, is a country of origin for their gold, tantalum, tin, and tungsten. Tesla has also been buying aluminium from Rusal since 2020. That's a very interesting story. Rusal was founded by Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, and it accounts for almost 9% of the world's aluminium output. He was sanctioned by the Trump administration in April 2018 for alleged illegal wiretapping, extortion, and racketeering, and he also allegedly ordered the murder of a businessman. The sanctions were later watered down by Trump and Co. As they would disrupt the aluminium markets, and Deripaska intended to invest $200 million in a Kentucky aluminium mill, but this plan eventually failed. But business is business, even when it comes from a Russian oligarch, and I'm sure Elon knows this. it would probably be impossible or extremely expensive to produce cars, rockets, and other technology without the raw materials from Russia or China. And the US sanctions imposed on the former have probably already made it more difficult. Maybe Elon just doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds his companies. I'm sure his lobbying power in the US will keep his businesses going even after his anti establishment hot takes. But we will probably never see him criticizing the likes of Russia, CCP, or Saudi Arabia. So, okay, we'll come back to Saudi Arabia in a second. Uh, a commenter on my own thread yesterday, I think, or possibly today. Was it today? No, it's today. 1 hour ago there. So only a few hours ago. See, I said in a previous vlog about 2 weeks ago that Musk must have something to do with Russia since he kisses their asses a lot. I never researched it, but as an ex-IC analyst, my spidey tingles were telling me your discovery of the source of the metals is excellent, but Musk still needs permission from Russia's space agency to dock on the ISS, and I believe that he also transports supplies to the station on his rockets. Thanks for the new info. If you're a Tesla owner, sell it, blah, 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 blah. Right. So it turns out that Tesla, so the Elon Musk led company has bought aluminium worth millions of euros from the Moscow-based Rusal, a company founded by sanctioned Russian oligarch, as we've heard already, since late 2020. The US Treasury sanctions against Rusal were lifted under Trump in 2019. And Musk has publicly supported Ukraine, but then it kind of changed. Russia's war against Ukraine has added to global automotive supply chain woes. Musk on Sunday said that this is going back to last year, March last year, that Tesla and SpaceX were facing significant inflationary pressure related to the cost of raw materials and logistics as a result of the war. And indeed, we have in this piece by CNBC last year, in March last year, Tesla has bought aluminium from Russian company Rusal since 2020, showing how war complicates supply chains. And it goes on to say later on, but Musk's car company has spent millions of euros with Rusal since the end of 2020, according to invoices and other documents viewed by CNBC. A German subsidiary of Tesla has historically paid the Swiss subsidiary of Rusal through an Austrian bank. This is how confusing and complex these international trade is, and how many people are involved. Tesla's purchases of aluminium from Rusal began after a changing of the guard in the company's executive ranks, and after Elon Musk announced in November 2019 that Tesla would buy a factory in Germany, according to records and internal correspondence, and current and former employees familiar with the matter. One former employee with direct knowledge of Tesla's said Tesla's previous CFO, Deepak Ahuja, was allergic to doing business in or with Russia due to the rise and impacts of Russian organized crime in the country and risks of sanctions of any suppliers or partners in Russia following Moscow's invasion and annexation of Crimea in 2014. So this is interesting. So this is someone actually probably quite sensibly saying we shouldn't do business with Russia because we might get into hot water with sanctions and they're a bit of a dodgy country, etc., etc. And then he was then got rid of or left or whatever. He announced his resignation in 2019, and Zachary Kickhorn took over as CFO in March that year. And Tesla worked with a consulting firm called Global Counsel Limited to analyze the business environment, market potential, and risks of working in Russia, according to his former employee and internal records viewed by CNBC. So while Tesla decided to hold off on opening factory sales or service centers in Russia indefinitely, the company was aware and some of its vehicles had been imported to Russia independently. As such, the company has created and maintains some vehicle service manuals and other road safety documents pertaining to the use of cars in Russia. By December 2020, Tesla decided to start sourcing some aluminium from Rusal for casting at its new plant being built in Germany, and was doing so through February 2022. In other words, they just changed their way of doing things and obviously thought, hey, nothing's going to happen. We'll be able to do this. The sanctions will drop off eventually. Not predicting that your man Putin would go and invade another sovereign nation, and that would make things really difficult. So remember, although he's had a rocky relationship with Trump, in 2016 Musk was appointed to Trump's advisory council. He then left that in 2017 because Trump pulled out of the Kyoto Agreement, or Paris Agreement, sorry. So due to Trump's environmental policies, Musk cut ties. He said, no, your environmental policy sucks, so I'm out of the advisory committee. But then he's been back and forwards with Trump and so on and so forth. and it has been this kind of rocky relationship. Musk said he would reinstate Trump's Twitter account, and then blah blah blah, so on and so forth. So it has been up and down. But could he have put pressure on Trump to allow the sanctions to be lifted on Rusal so that he could buy stuff from Rusal at a really cheap rate? Well, anyway, more recently, when was this? This is November last year. Biden has said that the US should review Elon Musk's relationships with foreign governments. Now, this is mainly with regard to Saudi Arabia. In particular, but also with regard to Russia. So this article says Tesla also needs vast amounts of raw materials for batteries, including Russian nickel. Musk was slammed recently for proposing a peace plan on Twitter to end Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine that had a noticeably Kremlin-friendly tone. Musk also has ties to China, as Tesla is the only foreign automaker. I mean, this is significant. Why is Musk the only foreign automaker in the country that's been allowed to fully own and operate its plant there without being forced to work with a domestic Chinese partner? There's no such thing as a free lunch. What's a quid pro quo with China, with Musk? What does he had to give up? What is he giving China that allows him to do that? That's what I would like to know. But also, obviously, the connections with Russia, and this is, the US government are officially worried about Elon Musk's relationships with foreign nations. So, going back to why does Elon Musk say things that really irritate me on Twitter that appear to be pro-Russian and wanting a kind of a peace plan that would freeze the conflict and give Russia Crimea and the Donbass. I mean, that's pretty much what Musk has advocated. Why is he doing that? Well, it turns out that actually he has very close connections with Russia and with China. He has business interests. Follow the money. Always follow the money. I hope that doesn't annoy people who are like, actually, do I care? Like, if you idolize a single human being, you will get yourself into trouble. You should never do that. Never idolize a single human being and put them up to almost divine status, because what happens is you allow them to do all sorts of wrong. If you associate them with your identity, I did do a segment on this almost a year ago now, I think, in one of my early videos, where I talked about identity and what people do with regard to identity and how cognitive dissonance kicks in, all this kind of stuff. If you associate a person or a thing or a belief or any kind of entity with your own personal identity, so it gets mixed up, when someone insults that person, it's like taking a personal insult. So if you love Musk that much that he becomes part of your identity, and those kind of interchangeably, if someone insults Musk, you get really, really defensive and you feel threatened by that, because actually Musk is you and you are Musk. Don't do that. Musk is a person. He can do really awesome, amazing things, but he can do really sucky things, right? And everyone should be in a position whereby we can identify nuance. We can look at things in a nuanced way, and we can say he did well there, but he did badly there. And if you can't do that, it means you have taken that thing, that object of criticism or object of like adulation, you've taken that thing too personally into your own identity. Don't do that. Don't idolize. You start idolizing, it permits all sorts of moral wrongs that person could do. It doesn't mean they will do that. You might absolutely idolize a pop star to the max, and they might be just a normal pop star for all their lives, or they could be Michael Jackson and end up doing dodgy things, and then you have this conflict. I can idolize you, your music's awesome, but do you know what? If you end up doing dodgy things with kids, I probably need to be a bit careful with how I evaluate you as a human. We need to be careful to do that with all humans and all entities. Like, say, you have some area where you can step back and say, yeah, but if something goes wrong with this thing, this entity, this human, then I should be able to have the space to understand that and take that on board and be able to see that thing or that person in a more critical light. Sorry, I am ranting now. Okay, or rambling. I'm not quite sure. I have now gone on for way longer than I was expected to. I ain't going to get to the end of this, that's for sure. Right, Trentilenko. I might get to the end of this, though. This says Trentilenko. Spear had secretly ordered and that repaired aircraft and even those undergoing minor refits at the factory be allocated to the new aircraft data list shown by Hitler, since Hitler was, of course, never going to request to read thousands of airframe numbers. Right, I'm going to go on to a little bit here where we can learn from history. Well, we can see history repeating itself. It may never repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. Here we have a thread on a World War II thread. So basically, let's just have a little look at this World War II tweet here. If you think World War II was bad for the Allies in terms of losses in 1944, consider the following sobering facts and breathe a sigh of relief. One, due to the attacks on the German synthetic oil plants, totally unbeknownst to us, German production of nitrogen and ammonia was almost stopped. This had such a catastrophic impact on the production of explosives and propellants that by late 1944, German shell casings were packed with nearly 70% rock salt, i.e. filler. Number two, in July 1944, Germany was fighting on three fronts, four if you include the airspace above Germany as a front. Only 20% of the production of fighters was allocated to the Luftwaffe Reich in mid-1944. This is one explanation for the failure to obliterate the Allied bomber offensive. Three, Germany had by 1943 almost totally lost the scientific arms race in the field of electronics and radar, having enjoyed superiority early on. As a result of their AAA shells, unlike Allied products, had no proximity fuse, but were set to predetermined altitude before firing by hand. Number four, USAAF auditors concluded after extensive investigation of Albert Speer's production records that around 8,000 new fighter aircraft did not exist. This is going to be pertinent to, well, this claim is pertinent to Russia, right? And possibly what has taken place over 20 years, not just in wartime, and had likely never done so. They concluded that to keep favour with the High Command, Speer had secretly ordered, that repaired aircraft and even those undergoing minor refits at the factory be allocated to the new aircraft data lists shown to Hitler. So it's like, hey, we've got like 3,000 new aircraft that have been built, and here are all the registration numbers of all those aircraft. And actually, if you were to look closer, you'd find out that those 3,000 aircraft were 2,800 of them were old aircraft that were just being fixed up and given new registration numbers. Secretly ordered and repaired aircraft and even those undergoing minor refits at the factory be reallocated to the new aircraft data list shown to Hitler. Since Hitler was, of course, never going to request to read thousands of airframe numbers, the deception was effective. And Trentilenko goes on to say, finishing the deception was effective, quote, looks so much like what we're seeing in Putin's Russia right now that all I can say is the study of World War II history is more relevant now than ever before. I wonder whether that kind of thing has been taking place in Russia for many years. And we have this paper trail that actually acts more like a paper sort of Potemkin army. That is the Russian army. There you go. Right, how much longer have I got? Okay, we can just finish off quickly. I'm going to show you this video here, if indeed it showed up and wasn't just a black screen. So, the Israeli security forces detonate an old minefield in the Golan Heights. The Defense Ministry says the mines were placed there by Israel following the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Just see how many mines must be here. I presume these aren't all like the detonations, but it's insane. I presume those are all mines, but they might not be. It might be the charges set to blow them up. But it's absolutely incredible that. Just a lot of explosive power there. Right, here's something. Ukrainian Army's US-made M992 field artillery ammunition supply vehicle transporting artillery shells somewhere in Ukraine. Right, so check this out. I'm sorry, but if I was like, what job would be the worst? Like being sent in the vanguard, like to go and attack Russian positions going through minefields in a Bradley. Right, it could be hit by a Ka-52 attack helicopter, blown up by a mine, or hit by an ATGM by the troops that we're driving against. Right, so that sucks. Chances of me surviving today are not zero, are not as good as I would like them to be. Sorry. But then you also could be one of these chaps in a vehicle that is its sole purpose is to carry massive loads of explosives around to people near the front line. You're like, yeah, if I get hit, there ain't no way I'm surviving. At least if the Bradley gets hit with an ATGM, you've got a fairly good chance of getting out of that alive, as we've seen previously. This gets hit with an ATGM or by a Ka-52 firing an ATGM, then you're carrying just a whole lot of death. Yeah, I don't know. I just wouldn't like to be that. If I was put on that duty, I'd be like, seriously, can I'm really good at driving ambulances. I can drive ambulances. There's no problem. Do I have to drive the thing full of ammunition? Do I really have to? Yeah. Yeah, must be stressful. I'm going to show you this very quickly. This is a trench getting hit.
Выкапывай! Выкапывай! Завалило! Выкапывай! Выкапывай дальше! Блядь, нихуя не чую! Давай, давай, Выкапывай дальше! Я намагаюся, я копаю! Чекай, дай розкопаю! Все нормально, живий, живий, живий. Можеш рухатись?
Блять, придавило ще одну руку.
Пацани, розкапуйте зі свого боку.
Давайте быстрее, блядь, відкапуй, або дай я, якщо можеш. Виходь!
And just remember, at this point, another shell could come down and hit you at any point now. You just it's hit really close here. I mean, we're all still alive, but this guy was buried, and the panic must be palpable. There you go. So good that guy survived. But yeah, fascinating how this war is being filmed from every conceivable angle, and every experience that people are having is being registered somewhere. It's quite incredible. Right, I'm going to leave you with something more positive. This is the wildlife segment. Yay! Everyone loves a wildlife segment to finish a thread, a video on war. So this is one of the most popular photos from Ukraine in the last week. Not a kangaroo, no. It's a giant hare found in the Kherson region by sappers demining the territory liberated from the Russian occupation in the autumn. By the way, it's about 700 kilometers from Chernobyl. So it's not a nuclear freak. Look at the size of that thing. I mean, look at that. That's look at its eyes. Its eyes, that's about as big as my face. That eye, this is insane. That's not real. Wow. It's just a huge animal, considering what you expect a hare to look like. Anyway, I thought I'd leave you with that. Take care. Thank you so much for all your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Let me know or in the thread below of all of your opinions on the topics brought up today. And man, if you love Musk, let me know how much you love him. But let's discuss our things in a respectful manner with each other. Anyway, speak soon.